Welcome back to Fuzz Lab. Today I'm going to be talking about painting. Painting is the aspect of this hobby that I enjoy the least, and that's due to a high failure rate. So today I'm going to share some tips of like what not to do, a few of the things that I've learned, and also a contraption that I whipped up that makes my life a little bit easier. And it's a little bit different than the typical what you run into is get yourself a toaster oven secondhand, and they work really well. I've got one of those here too. So, starting at the beginning, this is the first one that I painted. It's an old, this was my first pedal I ever bought. It was a Dodd FX95 flanger that like the pots all rusted out. So I did a rehouse on it, modded it out, and then I painted this. Walmart has 99-cent primer. The paint's a little, it's like $1.07, and you know they used to have clear coat at my. I've got to look into that and see if I can get it online because it's a much more affordable alternative to Krylon, and I'm not that happy with the Krylon. If anybody has any recommendations, also another thing that I'm curious about is just polishing the aluminum chassis. You know, I'd imagine you'd use like start with a wet sandpaper, work your way down, maybe use some kind of a compound to buff it and get it like really shiny, and then what do? You just clear coat over that. So if anybody's done that, I'm gonna have to look into it. I really, if you've never if you're gonna start building pedals and you don't have one yet, don't paint them. Just figure something else out. Like just go with the, there's a guy, Big Jimmy Photon does this, and he doesn't paint them. He actually labels them with Sharpie, and I'm so envious of his work because his painting's a night. It's so unbelievably time confusing, and like, you know, I go and put the screws in and the paint just cracks off back here. It's not that, you know, and I'm sure that's my fault. Temperature extremes or not shaking the paint or just using cheap paint. This thing, you know, I painted it yellow and then I did a second coat. Somebody had given me about 8 or 10 cans of some really fancy, oddly colored paints, and I used that second color here. But yeah, I don't know if you can tell, it looks like a grilled cheese. You want some chips and soup with your flanger? So yeah, you know, I hang out at do-it-yourself stomp boxes, and if you're watching this video, you're probably a member there, but that's a fantastic website, plug for that place, and much more information there. A lot of the guys there have been doing something that's kind of popular called swirl painting, and this is my first attempt at a swirl paint job. This is a Tillman JFET buffer that I did with acrylic paint, and I used gray, yellow, and green to get this effect. And then there's you know, a clear coat, I believe it's Krylon on top. I got a little cap switch on here on a buffer. Yeah. Genius. So the swirl paint it's cool. This was my second attempt. This is an AMZ MOSFET boost, and I call this one the Starry Night because it reminds me of that Vincent van Gogh painting of the same name. Highly recommended build. Jack Orman, thank you for your contributions. AMZ MOSFET booster, clean boost. And then this one over here, this is another swirl paint job. I asked my kids to do this one, and they were really into it. They were like, get out of here, my turn. They were like fighting over it, like with the paint everywhere. But yeah, they had a blast doing it, and it came out really well. I mean, swirl painting is, believe me, it's not as easy as it looks. You can kind of screw it up. But this turned out fantastic, and a little bit more about that. I went to Michael's, which here in the United States, it's like a crafts place that ladies go, and you know, they got all that weird like stuff to make like flowers and lady stuff. But anyway, I went into Michael's and they had a sale like half off, and they had this acrylic paint here. I found out later the same stuff is 99 cents everyday price at Walmart, which that was the half off price at Michael's. So the idea with the swirl paint is I use my old medication bottles, never a shortage on those, and bloop, a little bit of paint, a little bit of water. You mix it up because you want to cut this. You don't want it full, like this is like real booger, like it's real thick in the bottle. So you cut it with some water, and then you'll take your chassis and just kind of randomly or not so randomly start dropping different colors on there, and then you can use like a toothpick to kind of swirl it around, or if you really wet it down good, you can use gravity. You just don't want to really start, the more you do, the more you mess it up. You want to, you know, kind of take your time at it, but it does dry, so you kind of got to hurry up, and you just don't want to start moving it around too tight, because then it mixes together. You want to do it loose and one pass. Don't be trying to fix everything. Just do it and then let it dry. After it's thoroughly, properly dried, then you go ahead and put your clear coat over it. Now, my next big paint project that I did was, I'm a huge Adrian Belew fan. He had this Mustang guitar that had this like cubist style paint job on it. So I aped that paint job for this. And this is an effect, it's a Fox tone machine that I modified for less treble. But he used that effect, and he still does use like an octave up sound for lead sometimes. I love that sound, so I built this thing. It was a little harsh, modded it. The build took me like, this is a triple G PCB. It took me like an hour to populate it, and it's fantastic. But the paint job took me 2 months, and that was just, I mean, the painting, like I said, you know, I learned to use that blue masking tape. I made a couple mistakes, and the more times you attempt to fix stuff, the more you kind of screw it up. So then I got tired, I'm like, okay, it's finished. So I went to clear coat it, and, you know, like a goof, you know, I just power blasted on like 2 millimeters thick. And then I set up a bunch of cereal boxes on the table, and like, yeah, that's good for the kids. Vitamin P. So then I had like a little clip lamp for some heat with the boxes to keep the heat in. This was summertime. A moth comes and flies in. So I come in the morning. Yeah, you know, let me, and here he is, in the, all the way down, hardened into the clear. So I had to like wet sand that all out of there, and then I had another can of Krylon that I had garbage picked, and so I'm like, and it was just all, it was like all brown and like old, like something had happened to it. So then it was like, you know, thinner and wet sanding and another trip to Walmart, and way too thick again. And I was throwing it in the toaster oven real hot. And what happens is when you run, it says right on the can on the Krylon, 90 degrees. So when you go higher than that, the idea with this is that there's solvents inside the formula that when it's sprayed on here, that stuff is supposed to evaporate. And it's supposed to be at 90 degrees because when it evaporates, it's supposed to carry certain elements up out of the finish. You know, out of that formula, it evaporates out of there. If you rush it with heat, it goes out too fast and it leaves some of the ingredients inside the finish, which gives you that rubbery finish that never dries. So, I mean, I went like, you know, it wouldn't dry and I'd get fingerprints in it. So I let it run for a week. And I brought it in here and I set it down like 2 minutes, and I flip it over, I had it on a paper towel. And it had the pattern from the paper towel had cut into the finish. So I was like, it took me 2 months, like I said. Finally, what I ended up doing was I developed this, what I'm going to show you, ran it at 90, and then I would kind of alternate. I would run it at 90, and then I would put it in an air-conditioned area. Actually, I had a box up by a window unit, and I would run the AC on low and get it just nice and dry and like about 65 degrees in there, and I'd take it alternating from 65 to 90 degrees, and that's how I ended up getting it to tack up finally. So, yeah, this was... Sorry for aping your artwork, Adrian, but karma came back and got me for that. I never should have tried it. So this here, this is another tool that I like to use. It's the bottom of a cigar box, and then here's a handle from a dresser or something. And what this enables me to do, like, you know, I can hold it off here, and I got my Krylon a good, 16 inches away, and I'll shoot a floodlight at it. I'll have a 100-watt floodlight, and I'll angle the light so I can see it reflecting off the surface. And then when I really shook that sucker up, that Krylon up, I'll hit it with just the thinnest layer that I can with covering it all. If I don't get it all, I don't do what I used to do and I gotta get it all on there and hurry up. Don't ever do that. Just mist it, get a good base coat down, and then let it cure. And then, reapply. After it's cured 15 minutes, you're good to throw another coat on. After 3 is, I don't try to push it with 4. I find I keep getting more relaxed, and the can's getting closer, and I'm wanting that thick finish, and so I do 3 mist coats, and that's about it. And then, after it's dried for a full 24 hours, I don't know if it's really a good idea. A couple times I put a little bit more on, but usually that's enough. That's all you need. And this is nice because, I've got a few of these. Some of them have drinking straws on them to raise it up so it doesn't stick, and then you got the paper stuck to the bottom. But this piece here, it goes with the other half of this device that I've come up with. I'm going to talk about the toaster oven now. I got this wearing toaster oven, and that's where I first implemented this, where I could put it in there and then, open up the toaster oven and then grab this thing, and I would never be handling the chassis. They're on here, they come in and go out, and so that's the idea behind this little box here, and it fits perfectly inside the oven. With that toaster oven, I found there was a top burner for if you were gonna have a bagel and you wanted to get the top crispy, and I removed that. That was the only modification I did. I got rid of that because when I would have a full-size chassis on there, I would go to I got my toaster oven sits a little low, underneath this table, and so I'd go to put it in there, and I kept bumping onto that top burner. I would just nick it, and then it would screw up my paint, so I yanked that out of there. And another thing with those toaster ovens, they're great for primer and regular paint, but honestly, they run too hot. On mine it says, there's a timer and then there's the temperature. It says 110, and it's not 110. There's no way that's 100. It's got to be 130 when it says 110. It's not accurate at all. And you really don't want to be, trust me, that's where you get orange peel effect or fisheye, all kinds of bad stuff that happens to your paint, or it'll even burn. The paint will become balled up and burnt on there, and then you have to wet sand again. So you don't want to be wasting materials and time like that. And that lends to this other device I'm going to be showing you. But if you are using a toaster oven, just be real mindful of that temperature. You don't have to be running it all the time. Run it for 2 minutes, measure the temperature, and then you'll know. Well, after 2 minutes, it does get to 100 degrees or whatever it is, and keep that in mind. Maybe utilize a digital timer or get those old wind-up egg timers. Those are the most fantastic devices. Anyway, back to this device here. What I came up with was, I wanted to be able to hit 90 degrees. I didn't want to be running stuff at higher temperatures. So this is my lightbox, and it's constructed out of 2 old GPX brand garbage picked speakers. I cut out these oval slots on the side and then put little plexiglass windows in here. And I've got a digital thermometer that I got from Menards. It was pretty cheap. It was under 10 bucks. And that's got a temperature sensor that runs down in here. Inside the unit, there is a lamp assembly that's hacked in, and taking it apart, I can show you exactly what we've got going on with the light box. Here's the bottom piece. Initially, I had put in this old-fashioned regular thermometer here. That's still in there. The plexiglass is just hot glued in there. These are some old, like I said, GPX speakers that I ripped apart. And so there's a cutout here for the handle, and it's actually important that you kind of push it back to get it to seal up, because air will leak out of there and it'll change the temperature. Believe it or not, it actually does. And now here, this temperature sensor is just kind of hanging down here. You got to be a little careful so you don't bump it into what you painted, but you can see there's the lamp in there. I'll shut this off. Right now I'm running a 40-watt bulb in here, and it gets it up to 94 degrees. So I found that, I got a little insulator, like a larger piece of circular metal that's in there that's supposed to dampen the heat a little bit. But honestly, it doesn't get hot enough to start anything on fire. Not with the 40-watt. So I drop this carefully in there. Ideally, I get this set up. I had this kind of off on the side. I didn't paint anything for a while. But what I'll do is I'll just lift this up on like that and plop it down. Yeah, the thermometer sensor it's not hitting the chassis or anything. And it runs at 94 degrees, like I was saying. What's nice about this thing is I don't have to worry about it. It's not like a toaster oven where I was saying it runs too hot and it's got a timer, ding, it goes off. That element is, red hot in there. Uses a real lot of electricity. It gets fire hot. This sucker, I can leave this on overnight, and it's not like, well, I'm going to go put my chassis in the boiler room and then have it, because it's too hot. It's 100 degrees in the boiler. Probably more than 100 degrees, because I know I've rubberized some finishes in there too. And then it's like, a landlord comes in and it's Petey's drying shack. Got my meth lab set up in there, and the neighbor kid's got a Afghani. His little poppy fields are coming up. But yeah, this is the light box, the temperature gauge on the top, and it runs at 94. You can crack it like this. You can offset it, and then there'll be a little crack, and then I can get it to run around 89, 90 degrees. So yeah, this thing's awesome. Usually what I try to do is I'll start painting, beforehand. Like I'm going to want to build this pedal. I ordered the parts. Well, when I got my chassis, I went ahead and primed a bunch of them just so they would already be primed. So when I know what I'm going to build, like let's say it's a 3-pot build, I'll measure everything out. Because I've got all extra parts here, I'll measure everything out. I'll estimate the circuit board, or if you have the Vero, you can figure it out. You know it's 25 by 5. So I'll go ahead and cut all the holes in the chassis first. And this is look at this thing, the clown fuzz. This is going to be probably for my daughter. It's a little bit, I don't know if you can see that, but it's like fruit stripe gum look. It's kind of a little bit lamp-wristy for me. But this is acrylic on here, and then with a kind of a splatter. I did the blue and then the white, and then touch up around where I a little bit clean up the white, and then a little bit more blue over it, and then I would just dip in, water down those acrylics and take the brush and get the sparkle splatters in there. And yay! So yeah, this is going to be, it's probably going to be an ugly face is what's going to end up in here, which I thought, why not clown fuzz, goofy looking thing for a goofy sounding pedal, right? So yeah, with that one, I set that in the box for 2 days after I initially shot it. I'll probably end up putting a little more clear on here, maybe not, but that's what's really nice about this light box. It's a cool idea. I recycled the speakers, didn't really cost me anything, and I'm going to be using this. I've used it on all of my builds so far, and I found that I used to always have problems getting with either orange peel or something with the cheap Walmart paint, and part of that is like, the basic process, I guess I should have went through this earlier, is you're going to want to really clean it up. If you're not going to sand it, you don't have to sand these things. You're going to want to clean them. I go over it with soap and water, or maybe Ajax and a scrubby pad if you don't want to wet sand it. Then you're going to want to rinse that off really well. Then you're going to hit it with a tack rag with some thinner and then alcohol. And don't touch it. If you get the oil from your fingertips, is going to affect it. And then, you know, usually I'll prime it a little bit, and usually after I get 3 coats of primer on it, I will wet sand it a little bit, and that helps for a smoother finish. Same thing if I'm going for, like this was always wet sanded, you know, and it does close up. It looks really nice. But if you have any of those imperfections in there, or oil or any contamination like that, it's going to affect it when you're drying. And then if you're running heat, you know, the higher the heat temperature is, the more risk you run into. It is nice to use heat because it really, really speeds up the drying process. But if you start getting goofy and carried away, like just with the toaster oven cranking up on it, you're going to run into all kinds of problems. At least this was what I found. Your mileage may vary. I may have had bad paint. I may have been careless. It may be because I smoke. I don't know. But what I have come to realize since I put this device together, and I cure most of my stuff at 90 degrees, especially where I know it's going to be a little tricky, you know, like with the Krylon, everything I've done has turned out no problem, and it cures right away. It doesn't, you know, take forever to cure. Some of these I've shot, I've gotten a little careless and put thick coats on them. Well, as long as it sits in a light box, it'll be okay. Where back in the old days, man, I know what would happen. It would just take an unbelievably long time for that to dry. So, thank you for the views, and, you know, this is kind of an odd subject. I don't really know that much about this. I'm not a painter, very inexperienced, and, you know, I am proud of this. I think this is a pretty good idea here, but I'd be very open to any suggestions about this, especially just a blank aluminum look rather than painting. How am I going to do that? Again, I want to polish the aluminum chassis, make it look real nice, but maintain that. So am I going to have to finish that, or is it going to stay nice? I don't think so. You have to spray something on there. So any recommendations or any corrections, any of you guys have any ideas or things about painting, tips like that? You know, this is an open-ended process. I'm not professing to be some kind of an expert. Far from that. I just wanted to share what I've come to learn, some things not to do. And of course, this crazy little contraption here. So, thanks for the views. Subscribe, thumbs up. Word to your mother.
Keep on